A reading from Luke 17, beginning at verse 11. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise, go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Here in this passage we have an example, a great example of both faith and also the path that we follow in our Christian life. And you can imagine the scene that's described here. It's hot, that Jesus is walking down a road and he's in the border country between Galilee to the north and Samaria, which is just to its south. And there's no love lost between the Samaritans and the Jews. And so this is a kind of hostile place. It's in the borders. And as he walked this borderland, he went into a village only to be met by 10 lepers. Now, in this day and age, leprosy has lost something of its dread. But at the time of Christ, it was a very dangerous disease. And those who contracted leprosy, well, they had to stand at a distance from the rest of society and shout. And note what they called for. They called for mercy. Now this is a contrast with our day and age, which bristles with its rights and its demands. They came to Jesus not with any demand, but rather with a plea. They wanted mercy. And how different it is to ask for mercy from Christ rather than to demand healing from him. These Pharisees did not stand up these lepers did not stand up like the Pharisee in that parable. Remember, who stood up and said how grateful he was. He wasn't like other men, full of self-worth, full of his own achievements. No, they knew that humility is the appropriate way to approach Almighty God. And so they call out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And I wonder if they were disappointed with the response that Jesus gave them. I wonder that when he said that they should simply go to the priest, that their hearts fell. Had he shunned them like everybody else had done? They longed for healing. They longed to reclaim their place in society. And Jesus said, "Go to the priests." To the priests! What had they done for them in the past? But that wasn't what Jesus was doing. Jesus wasn't simply trying to shrug them off onto somebody else. Jesus knew the requirements of the Old Testament law. Jesus kept all the requirements of the Old Testament law himself. And he knew that a priest had to declare lepers to be clean. And so, if a leper is newly healed, where better place to send him than to the priests? And that's where the faith comes in. Because it's as Jesus spoke, well, nothing really happened. Their skin was still leprous and there was no sign that anything had happened. But it was as they followed Jesus' instructions, they heard Jesus speaking and then put it into practice, well, it was then that they were cleansed. Jesus had worked his grace, but the signs weren't visible straight away. Those lepers, as they performed that act of faith, that setting off to go to the priests, well, those lepers did that and then had the sign, the visible sign of the grace of God manifested in them as their leprosy was healed. They just had to take Jesus at his word and walk to the priests. And as they did that, as they took God, as they took Christ, as they took Jesus at his words, they were healed. And this is the pattern that we need to have for ourselves. We need to respond and act and heed Jesus' call and not demand signs all the time. What do I mean? Well, from time to time I come across people that say, well, they would be a Christian, but they don't feel that they have any need of God's forgiveness. And they say, well, when I feel some burden of guilt, some sign, well, then I'll be healed. Then I will be one who will turn to Christ. I'll become a Christian then. Or other people who say, well, I won't turn to Christ until I have some sign in another way that this happens or that happens. Oh Lord, if you do this for me, then I will follow you. But not so the lepers. They simply heard and they acted. And this is the model. We don't demand signs. We simply heed the calling of Christ. And as we do that, then God's grace is made visible to us. And this also, I should hope, is something of an encouragement to you all. Yes, we hear those great stories of great conversions. Yes, we hear of people having this great moment of being caught short. They read a verse of scripture or something happens and we think, well, I wish I had that. But that wasn't the case for these lepers. It was quieter. Jesus simply said, go, and they went. We don't need to have great dramatic starts to our Christianity. We simply need to follow the call of Christ. So I hope this is some encouragement to us when we feel that our faith is too ordinary, too mundane, that we long for some great sign. The lepers had no such sign, but they were healed from their leprosy as they walked in the paths of Christ. In the end, it's obedience to Christ, putting into practice his commands. That is the important thing. Yes, at times God, by his grace, chooses to bless us with a great sign of faith. But other times God, by the same grace, chooses another path for us. And that's his business. Our business is simply, like the lepers, to heed the words of Christ, to put it into practice, and to live out the Christian life.